Welcome to Awake to Oneness Radio. I am Caroline Chang, host and producer of Awake to Oneness Radio. And today, my guest is Lynne McTaggart, who is the inspiration to my awakening in as long ago as 2007. I discovered Lynne in the documentary film What the Bleep Do We Know? And one sentence she said was actually the catalyst to my awakening. She said, the biggest problem in the world today is the illusion of separation. And when she said that, something literally woke up inside of me. It was a soul awakening, not an intellectual awakening. It was an awakening from my soul that I knew that statement she just made was the ultimate truth. Lynne, welcome to Awake to Oneness Radio. Please let everybody know who don't everybody should know who you are, but for those that don't, please introduce yourself to the listeners.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here with you. Well, I am an internationally best-selling and award-winning author. I've written 7 books. I'm also a journalist. My books have been in 30 languages, and they include The Field, The Bond, The Intention Experiment, and my latest book, The Power of 8. And I'm also the architect of a thing called The Intention Experiment. Being an investigative reporter by background, I was curious listening to all the kinds of things about manifestation and law of attraction and wanted to know how far we can take it. Are we talking about a very subtle effect like shifting a quantum particle, or are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? And I was also curious what happens when lots of people are thinking the same thought at the same time. Yes. So that created the Intention Experiment, which is something I do working with various scientists, setting up well-controlled experiments and inviting my readers around the world to take part in this global laboratory. So I'll talk more about that later. I'm also the editorial director and co-founder of a magazine called What Doctors Don't Tell You. And I'm also the architect of a thing called Power of 8 Groups. That is small group intention. So my big focus at the moment is new science and also group intention and how that supersizes its effects.
Wow. Well, yeah, I totally, it was science. And I tell people all the time, it was quantum physics that gave me my spiritual awakening. And when I do my presentations, I always connect science, the core principles of quantum physics in layman's term, because I'm not a scientist, but I understand it in layman's term, and I translate that to spirituality, how that truly understanding that science has proven everything I was studying in metaphysics and spirituality, it was proven scientifically. And I was like, wow, that was like a big wow moment for me. And that was in 2007. And so literally my whole way of thinking about life and viewing life changed from that moment on. But exactly what you're saying, our power, I preach. I try not to say preach, but I just tell people all the time, it's your thoughts your thoughts and your words are more powerful than you think they are. And I followed the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton and Brett Graydon. And when you were saying curing cancer, I remember seeing that video long ago where Greg Braden did a video literally showing the cancer just shrinking because of thought, because of the power of our thoughts. They're so powerful.
Well, that's true. And I have run 41 intention experiments to date. Everything from trying to make seeds grow faster, to purifying water, to lowering violence in war-torn or violent areas. We've done about 12 peace intention experiments, to
Mhm.
healing people of things like post-traumatic stress disorder. Each time I'm inviting my readers around the world or an audience I'm standing in front of to take part in this experiment. And I've enlisted a scientist from a prestigious university like Princeton or Penn State
Mhm.
or the University of Arizona or University of California to
Mhm.
measure the results, set up the experiment and measure the results.
Okay.
Of those 41 we've run to date, 37 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. So
Oh,
we've proven
yeah.
over and over again that thoughts are not only things, but thoughts are things that affect other things.
Yes. Because everything is interconnected and interdependent. Very true. Like on my water, and this particular water bottle doesn't have my label on it. I take the store-bought label off and put my label, I love you and thank you, on my water, every one of my water bottles, to because Dr. Emoto, I think, am I saying his name right? The water experiments, and there's a lady in, and I wish I could think of her name right now, but there's a lady in Australia that has taken his water experiments to the next level when it comes to words and thoughts and intention on the water, because we're made up of 75% water, so it's like this is so, I wish people would stop thinking this is woo woo, because there's nothing woo woo about it.
Well, absolutely, Carolyn, because we're demonstrating that. I'm
Hmm.
working with scientists. We're
Yeah.
demonstrating that thoughts are an energy that affect things. And when you take it back to quantum physics, as you say, that explains it.
Yes.
Because the quantum fathers, this is back in the early 1920s,
Yes.
when they discovered that reality out there, subatomic reality out there, subatomic particles, weren't an actual anything yet. They were only the potential of something. They
Right.
were in multiple states, all possible states. I
Yeah.
like to say it's like an auditorium full of chairs.
Hmm.
And a quantum particle is not only a chair, but every seat in the auditorium.
Right.
Until one thing happens, it is measured or observed by an observer. And at that point, it collapses down to a single state.
Hmm.
So we have the ultimate influence on our world. We are co-creators. And lots of people talk about that and talk about, we're all one, we're co-creators, all of that kind of stuff that's always declared to be woo-woo. But
Yes.
it is at the heart of quantum physics. And quantum physics is the most successful science we've ever had.
Exactly. Exactly. I say
So
that too. I just wanted to interject. I say that I tell people that everything we use, the computer, the cell phone, everything, the smart grid, the cloud, all of this is based off of quantum physics science. Quantum physics isn't a theory. It is what we use in all of today's technology. And I had a scientist on the show once that said, if a person doesn't believe in oneness, they shouldn't be allowed to own a cell phone, because yes, I thought that was so good. Because it's like, if there wasn't oneness, if there wasn't everything interconnected and interdependent, that cell phone would not work. So it's like,
no,
yes.
I know that is brilliant. That is
Hmm.
brilliant. I love that. But that's true. And when they talk about it's the most successful science, what they mean is that it's been proven over and over again in math.
Yeah.
Now, remember, scientists doing quantum physics and pretty much all physics and all science talk in code. They talk in mathematics.
Right.
So that math works out better than any other science.
Yes.
So they believe in quantum physics. The disconnect is they say there's a difference between the world of the tiny and the world of the large.
Right.
But we are now discovering quantum effects in big things too, in big visible things in the big visible world. For
Yeah.
instance, with photosynthesis. It operates with a quantum process at the very heart of it.
Mhm.
Now, photosynthesis is the most important reaction on Earth because it creates oxygen from the light of the sun,
Mhm.
and that is responsible for all life on Earth.
Yes. Mhm.
So it's there. It's also there in very big molecules. Some of the biggest molecules on Earth operate according to quantum properties.
Right.
So, this idea that subatomic particles behave in some wacky way
Right.
until they recognize that they're part of something bigger, in which case they start behaving themselves according to Newtonian laws, is
Yeah.
pretty crazy.
It is. And I don't know if I'm sure you've heard of Nassim Harriman.
Mhm.
He's come out with a paper recently. I would say within the last 2 months or so, but he has his, and he talks in that language of math. He has unified those two in this paper. I did I told you I'm a journalist now and I write articles every week. And one of the articles I did a few months ago was on his paper. Now, I don't understand the math. And I am not a scientist. I don't want to be. I don't want to try. I think his equation might be 15 pages long or something like that. I'm not going to look at that and try to. I don't want to even start. But I do trust that he, as a scientist, and as a scientist that speaks in that math language, has it's a pretty new paper that was just published a few months ago where he's unifying the two physics, the classical physics with the quantum physics realm, which is
Yes, and there are a lot of areas where even, I mean, this is 25 years ago or
mhm,
more, people like physicists like Hal Puthoff demonstrates. He was from the University of, well, he was from Austin, Texas, and
okay.
worked at Stanford and other places um, before working at an institute in Austin, Texas.
Mhm,
And he looks at the 0 point field, which is the quantum field that
mhm,
truly does unite everybody and
yes,
everything in its invisible web. And
right.
he said that certain problems that had bedeviled scientists for a century, like inertia,
Mhm,
they've never been able to prove inertia, which is um, something at rest takes a lot to get it going, to
mhm,
moving. And then once you move it, it takes a bit to stop it. Now, it doesn't take very much energy to do that with a ping pong ball, but it
right.
takes an enormous amount to do it with an elephant. So, so he was trying to show that no one had been able to really say why inertia works other than to claim, as Newton did, well, this is a dictum, essentially. This is something that is fundamental and we can't prove it. But he did, using
Okay.
and factoring in the 0 point field. So I think the big point is science isn't a finite truth.
Right.
It's only a story. And each, as we go along, new chapters are written that rewrite the chapters that have come before. And that is what's going on now. And we are starting to understand via many pioneering scientists that life is very different from the story we've been told, and science is very different from the science we've been told.
Very, very true. And one of the other things I stress, because what I try to do as a layperson, not a scientist, I just try to explain it in layman's terms. But I explain that also one of the things with our five human senses, they're extremely limited. They're so limited. Science is saying with our five limited senses, we can only detect, I think it's like 0.035% of what is actually around us because they have instruments that can detect much more than our senses can. So I say this all the time. I say if a person says, well, I don't believe it if I can't see it, I say, okay, well, then you're negating 99.96% of what is actually around you. So I try to get people to think in those terms of how limited our human senses are. And we know that from instruments that can measure much more than our human, like our human eyes or ears or things like that. So,
Absolutely. There's so much going on around us. Our, as you say, our ability to absorb all of this information is hugely limited. The amount of information that is coming at us
mhm,
compared to what our eyes, let's say, can take in at any
right.
moment
Mhm,
is a tiny fraction. But we're absorbing it in a different way.
yes.
And that is the work that I do, is looking at our extended human potential and the fact that our thoughts are trespassers. There's no question that we, at our nethermost level, are energy.
Mhm,
We are just energetic entities. Our subatomic particles are energy. They're
mhm,
little packets of vibrating energy. They're not billiard balls the way they're shown in physics class and chemistry class. They're little vibrating packets of energy, trading energy with other subatomic particles out there.
right.
And this little energy game of tennis is going on with all the subatomic particles in all the things in all the world. And that gives rise to that thing I called the 0 point field.
Right.
Now, we're now demonstrating that our thoughts are one more type of energy, but
Mhm,
it's not just locked inside our skulls as we have been taught. We've thought that our thoughts are completely locked inside our skulls and our thoughts equal our brain. But
mhm,
we're now discovering that our thoughts are energy that essentially is transmitted outside our bodies and affects other people and things. And that in some evidence demonstrates that thoughts are essentially light,
mhm,
that there's a light emanating from the body. Scientists have called them biophoton emissions.
mhm,
They've been measured by many physicists around the globe, frontier physicists.
mhm.
It may be light, it's some sort of energy,
Yes.
and it's affecting other energies. So if we get away from the idea that we are just solid, stable things, and we think differently about that sticks and stones world out there, that at its heart, it's all just energy. It makes much more sense how a thought can influence things out there.
Very true. It's actually, and I bring this up all the time too, in seventh grade, seventh grade science class. My science teacher said when we were studying atoms and molecules, I'll never forget him saying this, and this stuck with me. So it was another awakening moment in seventh grade. He said, "We do not live in a solid world." He said, we were studying atoms and molecules, and he was showing us, the pictures of the atoms and molecules and how far apart they were. And now we know that an atom is 99.9999% empty space. So he said that, like, he just made the declaration to his seventh grade class: we do not live in a solid world. And that stuck with me. And then when I watched What the Bleep, that came back, and I'm like, yes, everything is energy. I always say everything is energy, interconnected and interdependent. And I said, it's the same energy. That's what makes us all one, because it's the same energy, interconnected, interdependent, vibrating at different frequencies. And the frequency of that energy is what is most important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's what's so interesting about this is how actually interconnected we really are. We don't get that. I
Right.
start seeing it because I experiment and I teach in the realm of, as I say, extended human potential,
Yes.
showing everyone they have a secret gift.
Yes.
We're all born with the ability, via these thoughts that affect other things,
Right.
to heal ourselves, each other, and the planet.
Yes.
But This is constantly denied as we grow up by the authority figures surrounding us, whether it's parents or teachers or whatever. Children know this, but
Right.
then they get discouraged. And after a while, they forget that they have this capability. And so that's what I try to bring back, showing people the power of intention and how to do intention.
Yes.
And also demonstrating to them there's loads of science behind this. My books,
Tons.
I try to write them in absolute layperson's language. I am not a scientist, but they also have about 400 references each. So
Yes.
it's based completely on science,
Yes.
looking at whether it's the science of intention, the science of the new science,
Mm-hmm.
or what happened with our own experiments with the power of eight.
Right. So please, I mean, we are living in what people would say crazy times, but I believe we are living in the greatest time in in the world. I believe we are living in the midst of humanity's great awakening. I truly believe it's been talked about in ancient wisdom, spirituality, but I believe it's happening right now. We're in the midst of it. And so much quote unquote craziness. And I say quote unquote craziness because me personally, believe that everything is happening in perfect divine timing and in perfect divine order. We as human beings don't see that and don't understand it, but it is all happening perfectly as God, if you would say, my term for God is all that is. It's happening in perfect order, which appears to be chaos, which they talk about that in science, the chaos theory appears to be chaos is really in divine order and timing. So what's the craziness? And I personally, I stopped watching the news in 2001. I have not watched a second of mainstream news since the week after 9/11. Not a second. And that was an inner guidance. Inner guidance said, turn it off and don't ever turn it back on. And at that time, I didn't know why. That was before I saw What the Bleep. Okay. So at that time, I didn't know why, but I was obedient. I was obedient. So what the craziness that's going on, I hear of the wars that are going on. I don't watch that stuff because I know that what I focus on creates it. Yeah, so I don't want to I'm focusing on peace, love, sending peace and love and light to those conflict areas in the world. So tell us what you're doing.
Okay, as I mentioned, since 2007, I've been running intention experiments.
Right.
And we had some amazing initial experiences with them and outcomes. I mean, one of my favorite had to do with trying to make seeds grow faster.
Okay.
With this experiment, I was working with Dr. Gary Schwartz, the noted psychologist
Yeah.
at the University of Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And he and his lab, he had a whole lab for studying consciousness. And his lab put together 4 sets of seeds, photographed these sets of 30 seeds each, sent them to me. And I decided to run this experiment in Sydney, Australia, because I was speaking in front of an audience of about 700 or more.
Okay.
So I had them choose the seeds we were going to send intention to.
Mm-hmm.
We did that. We didn't tell the scientists which seeds we'd chosen. They were labeled A, B, C, D.
Okay.
We just told them we'd finished, and that was their cue to plant the seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 days later, they measured them. And what they discovered was, at that point, I then unblinded the study, and what they discovered was the seeds sent intention grew significantly higher than controls.
Wow.
Now, we did this 5 more times at different locations with different size audiences. In person in 4 more of those instances, and the 5th new study was all of my audience participating via my website
Mm-hmm.
on the internet.
Right.
And every single one demonstrated the studies sent intention grew significantly higher than controls.
Yes.
Now, let's just look at that first study.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in Sydney, Australia with my audience. The seeds, meanwhile, are in Tucson, Arizona, 8,000 miles away.
Right.
And we're not sending intention to the seeds themselves. We're sending intention to a photograph of the seeds, a
Okay.
symbol of the seeds. And yet we're having an effect. And that happened over and over and over again. So that started giving me the idea that when we do intention together, we create essentially a psychic internet.
Yes.
So I moved on from seeds, and we did many trying to purify water. I did one with the late Masaru Emoto, trying to purify samples of Lake Biwa in Japan, which is the largest mother lake of Japan. It essentially feeds the population, but it's very polluted. So
Okay.
we took 2 samples. We did an intention to make it more alkaline, to make it more pure
Right.
and healthier.
Right.
And it worked. And as I say, all of these experiments demonstrated an effect. So 2008, I got bored with seeds and leaves and water and said,
Okay.
let's do something big. Let's try to end a war. So we did this. The first one we did was Sri Lanka, which was going through a civil war, and it had been going on for 25 years.
Okay.
We did an experiment, and I did this one over 8 days, 10 minutes each with my audience around the globe. We had about 15,000 people participating. And what happened during that week, I was actually quite freaked about this. Violence went up, and then it plummeted afterward. And I had Dr. Jessica Utz, a famous statistician, a professor of statistics at the University of California, do all of our data. You know, she looked at the data from before and afterward, and we chose Sri Lanka because we could get a lot of data. You know, it's very difficult to get accurate data about casualties during the war. Nobody wants to talk about the bodies.
Right.
But we were able to do this with Sri Lanka. And we found, although violence went up during our week, it plummeted. But we found out something even more significant. The government, which had been in a real stalemate with the rebel forces, won several decisive battles during that week, which is why violent data went up, the casualty rate went up. And that turned around the entire course of the war. They were the most important battles of the 25 years. Within a few months, the government had reclaimed the north, which had been choked off and controlled by the rebels. And a few months after that, that 25-year war was over.
Wow.
Now, big question, did we do this? You know, there's a lot of variables here. Everything from the weather to all kinds of things can change the course of a war.
Right.
But it kept happening over and over again. We had an experiment some years later, about 9 years later, we did one for the officially most violent place in America, which was St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
And we focused on a particular area of St. Louis that was the most violent of that violent city. And we were able to get police data from 3 years before to 6 months after our intention to see what had happened and to see if it was just continuing on what was an upward trajectory. And we found that everywhere in St. Louis, and we could compare neighborhoods too, everywhere in St. Louis had violent crime continue to go up, except the area we were focusing on, Fairground, where violent crime went down by 43%.
Wow, that's a lot.
So everywhere else,
Yeah.
it continued to go up, including St. Louis as a whole, but not the neighborhood we focused on, the area. So we've had those kinds of successes. And let's just look at something. Because one of the things that I found was from 2008, I started surveying participants. And I found, to my astonishment, that not only were the targets being affected, but so were the participants themselves.
I see.
So in my surveys, I would send out just to initially to find out how did that go for you? Were you able to get on my website? All of that kind of stuff. Because
Right.
I'd ask people to join in from their computers, wherever they were around the world, and
Right.
we'd have participants from 80, 90 countries.
Right.
And then to uh, to tell me how it was for them. And I was shocked to hear, first of all, people felt almost like they were in an altered state.
Mm.
Many people were crying uncontrollably. They were feeling energy up and down their arms. They were feeling, heat coming off of their computer, all of this stuff. Now, these are people like you and I are doing right now,
Right.
sitting in front of our individual computer screens, right?
Right. Right.
So that was happening. But even more than that, they were reporting healings
Mm-hmm.
among relationships. Their lives were becoming more peaceful. They were getting along better with estranged partners or children. They were getting along better with bosses and coworkers. And most of all, about half reported they felt more love for everybody they came in contact with. They were they were hugging strangers basically.
That's wonderful.
So that was happening. And also, about a third of the people reported healings, physical healings.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was pain, they were out of pain. Most recently, one woman said she was a type 1 diabetic, and for the first time in many years, her blood glucose was dropping. So we see this all the time too, healings of
Mm-hmm.
people. And we see people who are enemies
Mm-hmm.
coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the most memorable intention experiments I did was in late 2017. I had special equipment enabling me to put cameras in 9 different locations.
Mm-hmm.
So we put cameras in 8 different Arab cities.
Okay.
um, I was working with like the Deepak Chopra of the Middle East, a guy called Dr. Salah Al Rashid,
Mm-hmm.
and we put cameras in 8 different Arab cities in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Jordan, etc. And the 9th camera we put in an auditorium filled with Israeli Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had to broker the entire thing because neither side was talking to the other. Even the groups heading it,
Mm-hmm.
were awkward talking to an Arab talking to a Jew and vice versa.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So we ran an intention experiment to lower violence in Jerusalem, which was in the old city, was suffering a lot of violence.
Right.
And then because of this equipment, I could talk to all the individual places and they could talk to me and they could be heard by everywhere else,
Right.
all of the other places. And we also invited my audience around the globe to take part via YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And it was astonishing to our just shock. The Arabs were sending love to the Israelis. The Israelis were crying and saying, "Your God is my God." And it was going back and forth like this.
Yeah.
So I see this consistently. Not only does a target get affected, but the people participating get affected. There's an extraordinary mirror effect that
Mm-hmm.
not only helps people create peace in their lives, but also greater tolerance. Something about doing this big thing together,
Right.
essentially a kind of secular prayer,
Mm-hmm.
enables the heart to go across the fence.
Very true. So true. I mean, Gandhi said it first, but be the peace. Be it. It starts. Peace in the world literally starts with peace in our heart. And if we don't have peace in our heart, we won't see peace in the world. It starts with us. And I've been, especially since all of the talk of war and stuff worldwide last year or more, I've been, stressing that we have to be, and it starts with us. So, like you said, if you're having an argument with your neighbor or your coworker or a family member, try somehow to make peace, even if you make peace from a distance, and I've done this with family members, I forgive automatically because I know there is no separation. So automatic forgiveness. I forgive, and I've even sent thank you. I sent thank you notes to family members where I just said, thank you for being you. That's it. Just thank you, because I know in a bigger spiritual picture, which I'm not going to get into, we planned it. We planned that soul interaction. Everything that happens is a soul plan. So it's about even, and when they get the card, they're like, well, what is she talking about? But whatever. I don't even go into detail. I just say, thank you for being you. So I know that by holding on to grudges and being angry with people, that's putting more anger and hate into the world, which I don't want to do. So I have
Mhm.
to start with me first. I have to start with me and clear my energy field and fill my energy field with love and peace. And then I know I will see, because it is a mirror, what I put out into the world is going to reflect back to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one thing that I have found, it really accelerates this, is a group, a small group,
Yes.
a power of eight group. So on this journey that I've had, around 2008, the same time,
Mm-hmm.
I was seeing all of these amazing effects with intention experiments. And I kept wondering, what would happen if I shrunk this down
Mm-hmm.
and started teaching little groups how to do intention? And so I started doing that, and I had studied the power of intention. And I worked with Buddhist monks, master healers, Qigong masters,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd studied the science of intention.
Mm-hmm.
Wrote about all of this in my book, The Intention Experiment.
Right.
And excuse me.
That's good.
And so in 2008, I was running a workshop and I'm kicking it around and I'm talking to my husband, Brian, who works with me in various things, particularly on what doctors don't tell you and in other areas,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of my team. And I'm kicking it around and I said, I don't know, maybe I'll put people in groups of 8 or so, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll have them send intention to someone in the group with a health challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian is a journalist also. He's a great headline writer. And he turned to me and said, I love it, the power of 8. And
Okay.
that's how it started,
Okay.
literally like that. I
Uh-huh.
didn't expect anything to happen. I put people in groups in this workshop in Chicago, and I thought it would be a little feel good effect.
Mm-hmm.
Hold an intention for someone in the group with a health challenge. Everybody feels a little better. But that's not what happened. We put people in groups, we had them come back the next day, and then we said, okay, how are you? And we were shocked when people said things like, we saw one woman who had been limping all weekend and she walked in normally. She
Mm-hmm.
had terrible arthritis in her knee. And we had somebody else with depression who said, it's lifted today. And somebody else who said, um, I I have a bad gut, but it's normal today. And someone else blew us away, said, I have cataracts and they're 80% better today.
Wow.
So we were shocked by this, and I kept thinking, why is this happening? So I started testing it and
Mm-hmm.
testing it. Every time I'd have a workshop or a, a talk, I'd put people into groups and watch what happened, tell them what to do, watch what happened. And we just saw, I see amazing healings. I've seen thousands of healings now. I've
Wow.
had 2 people get up out of their wheelchairs. One person paralyzed from the neck down. I had a guy just a week ago. I was speaking in San Diego a
Okay.
little over a week ago, and he had a problem with his spine. The doctors gave him a drug, and he had a terrible side effect to it, and it paralyzed him on the right side.
Mm-hmm.
So he had got better, but not completely better. He was still paralyzed in his shoulder and his leg.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put people into groups, did an intention for him, and he came up to me afterward and said, "Well, I'm healed. I'm moving everything." totally
Mhm.
better.
Wow.
So this is the kind of thing we see all the time.
Yes.
But what I started doing after I found this, Carolyn, I decided to put people in groups for a whole year because I
Mm,
wanted to find out, well, what would happen if I put them in groups for a whole year? Would they get better?
right.
And this, I kept experimenting with this. This is why, and studying it, trying
Right.
to figure out why is this such a potent healer, these small groups.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it took me 10 years to get up the courage to publish my book, The Power of Eight, because
Okay.
I felt I need to understand this. I need to understand the science behind this
Right.
and why it works so well,
Right.
why people are healing.
Mm,
But the big question I had was, okay, if I put people in groups for a year, I teach them
right.
the 13 keys to intention mastery and all of the other things I teach about using intention in relationships and overcoming negativity with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, would everything in their life begin to heal? And
Mm,
that's my big question. So I
right.
started that in 2015.
Okay.
And before I knew it, I was seeing remarkable effects where people were reversing all kinds of challenges in their life. Like I think of Mitchell Dean, who is a clinical psychologist, but suffered from suicidal depression. Now, that's not a good look for a psychologist if he's treating other people,
I hear you.
but he had that. He had writer's block. He was trying to create a new therapy and couldn't get anywhere with it. He wanted to lose weight. He had everything. He had stopped playing music. His life was stuck.
Mm-hmm.
We did the intention for him. We put him
Right.
into groups. And he had a group working with him once a week for an entire year as I do.
Right.
And what happened is that the group sent an intention to him to find out the cause of his depression because
Mm-hmm.
he tried everything, every alternative thing in the book.
Right.
And suddenly he got some intuitive hit to go to a Chinese herbalist
Okay.
and check out his liver.
Mm-hmm.
So the herbalist did and checked out to see about his liver filtration systems and found that one of them wasn't working.
Oh,
As soon as they fixed that, his depression virtually disappeared.
wow.
He also, through the year, lost 15 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
overcame writer's block, created this new method, this new therapy for his patients,
Mm-hmm.
reclaimed music. He started playing music again. His
Wow.
Qigong practice got better. His whole life changed. His relationships improved. And that's the kind of thing we see over and over and over again
Wow.
with people who continually meet in their groups.
Wow. I think, well, you know what? I am going to start a group of 8 myself. Honestly, I am. I don't even know right now. I couldn't even tell you 8 people other than one that I recently met on Facebook, just recently this past week. And he and we've been talking just because we have this same goal of world peace. It's like just world peace is what we want to see in our lifetime. And I believe in my heart and soul, it's possible. We're there. We're in the midst of the Great Awakening, and that is what I write about a lot in my column. Is the true nature of our matrix, bridging science with spirituality. That's the column I write for, that I named, I coined, and I write for an online journal. But this is, yes, it's for me, and especially this year, 2024. I was so excited for 2024 to arrive for a couple of reasons. Okay, your birthday was yesterday, I've been told.
It was. Thank you.
Happy birthday, belated.
Thank-
My birthday was a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I'm on the 12th. My birthday was the
Oh,
12th of January, but I actually was gonna, when someone told you, actually the friend that I met on Facebook told me it's Lynn's birthday today. I was like, no, I'll tell her in person. But
oh, that's so cute. Thank you. Thank you very much.
For me, the number 62 has always been special. I was born in 1962, and this year was my 62nd birthday. And I
Oh, cute.
celebrate. It was the best birthday I ever had because I like 62. My house number is 6200. The lot that it's on is 6200 in. It's just the number 62 has always been a special number for me. And so this year is a special year. And
That's really
I
cute.
know that we're going to see so much happening in this year in a good way for humanity. I just know it. And my thing is just telling people, don't first of all turn off the news. Number one, turn off the news. But if you have it, just stay focused on what you want to see in the world. Your thoughts, your intentions, your words are so powerful, and focus on what you want to see in the world.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I mean, one of the things I teach in my year-long course, which has become a course, it's the
Mm-hmm,
Power of Eight Intention Masterclass,
mm-hmm,
is that you're all leaky buckets. We're
mm-hmm,
all leaky buckets, and we are sending out at every moment. And we have typically about 80,000 thoughts a day,
mm-hmm,
at least.
mm-hmm.
And most of those are pretty negative. One of the things I do with my students is have them start tracking it.
Yes.
And they're all shocked. You know, the judgments we hold about ourselves and everybody else, our negative feelings. Good on you for not watching the news because the news makes us feel worse. Um, and all of that, you know, really makes us feel negative. But we walk around in negativity, and that negativity essentially is our intention.
Mm,
And that becomes our life's intention.
right.
So, one of the things I train people in is being much more focused and intentional with what you're thinking about
Yes.
and how you think about things with your group to start manifesting them. And as I say, there are 13 keys. You
Mm-hmm.
know, intention takes some practice, it
Yes.
takes some skill, and it takes some learning.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I try to help people to do. But what I have found is the people who stay with it, you know, there are people who meet in Power of Eight groups just kind of casually, and they may experience some successes, but the people who really change their lives are the people who meet consistently week after week. Of that first group, for instance, 2015, because I monitored them, I was studying them like a petri dish.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Those who continue to meet regularly, 100% of them, 100% had one or more major life changes.
Mm.
And that was everything from health change, a healing,
Right.
you know, and there were every kind of healing
Right.
from that to chronic fatigue, cancer reversal, all kinds of healings
Right.
to to finding new relationships or
Mm-hmm.
healing ones they had,
Right.
to having financial windfalls. I
Mm-hmm.
love Bev's story. She was down to her last 200 pounds. She is British.
Mm-hmm.
And her group intends for her, and she gets a letter from Lloyd's of London she had worked at years before
Right.
saying, "You're eligible to apply for a grant." She
Mm-hmm.
did. She got a nice big fat check. We've had those kinds of stories, or people who, like Joy,
Mm-hmm.
who wanted to put more love in her life. She asked to have more love in her life. Her group did an intention. This
Right.
is during COVID. I love this
Yeah.
story.
Yes.
Out of nowhere, she gets a call right after that from a boyfriend of hers 35 years ago.
Wow.
And he calls her and they start communicating. She's in Australia, by the way. He's in the UK. He's in Britain. They
Okay.
start communicating, they start calling. He then decides to go ahead and go to Australia and deal with the 2-week quarantine he had to go through
Oh,
in a
yeah.
hotel,
Yes.
and then moves in with her and they're together. It's
Wow.
so cute. But
Amazing.
that sort of thing happens all the time. And there's so much power in a group. And by the way, you said, I don't know if I have 8 friends. On my community part of my website, lynnmctaggart.com,
Okay.
you can, which is free to everyone. You can
Okay.
just come on there and just put up a notice. It's like writing on Facebook to
Okay.
say, hey, I'm in this time zone.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to join me for Power of Eight sessions? I'm
Okay.
free. So that's what anybody can do.
I'll do
Um,
that.
and then, you can just, so people can join a
Yeah.
Power of Eight group with
Yes.
nothing. If they
Yes.
want instruction from me, they can
Right.
join one of my many courses. My master class is coming up February 17th. It kicks off. And that's the one where I'm live and interactive, teaching
Right.
people over 6 sessions. And then we put you into groups for a whole year.
Wow. I'm going to definitely have all your links below in this description of this video. Also, another thing I did in 2001, I started a appreciation journal. And the first thing I do in the morning, open up that journal. I have 3 journals. I have a regular journal. I'm a writer. I'm a born writer. I love to write. But the appreciation journal every morning, I open it. I write on one page, a full page of what I'm thankful for. I start my day focusing on what is in my life in this now moment that I'm thankful for. So I have that appreciation, and I started that in 2001. So it was like a lot of things happened for me in 2001 that kind of just spontaneous, like turn off. I literally from within inner guidance yelled at me, turn off that news and don't ever turn it back on. And I was like, why? Honestly, I said aloud, why? Never didn't get an answer till 11 years later. But anyway, I was obedient. I was obedient. But I definitely, yes, I am very interested in joining a group or being a part of a group of 8. And our focus is world peace. That is so, yes. Go ahead. Now you're doing something now though, right? With what's going on in the Middle East and Ukraine and all of that.
Thank you so much for asking about that, Carolyn. I was just going to say something about it. And that is, yes, since the attacks on Israel in October,
Yeah.
we've done 3 intention experiments for peace. And we had about 30,000 people with us on doing this with us. And we found right after our 3, we asked for immediate ceasefire and return of many hostages, and that happened. However, of course, if the war still goes on, there's a lot to do. But I want to discuss something else that you were talking about of wanting world peace
Yeah.
and relating to, as I say, the extraordinary things we saw with the Israeli intention experiment in 2017.
Yes. Okay.
So we saw both a an effect of polarized people coming together and
Mm,
also peace in their own lives. So let's just take this 30,000 people.
okay.
So we see half of the people who participate in these experiments, who answer our surveys, experience great peace in their lives, at least half,
Mm-hmm.
and many more,
Mm-hmm.
many times. But let's assume that all 30,000 of the people that were participating in these Israeli experiments
Right.
experience peace in their lives.
Yes.
Let's look at the work of Harvard professor Nicholas Christakis, who does work on social networks. And he
Mm-hmm.
shows that social networks, the attitudes that appear with some people ripple down their social network.
Mm-hmm.
So happy people are more likely to have happy friends,
Right.
not because they self-select happy people to be with, but because of the natural spread of happiness. Same thing happens with people who do kindness to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
It ripples down a social network by at least 3 degrees. What that means is
Mm-hmm.
if Peter is kind to Paul, Paul
Right.
is more likely to be kind to Jane, who's more likely to be kind to Sarah, who's more likely to be kind to Carol.
Right.
And so this works. And each time it ripples down. So let's just do the math, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So let's assume all 30,000 people participating in my Israel-Gaza experiment all experienced their own peace and healing. Let's say they all did.
Yes.
And they each know 50 people. That's the most conservative estimate of an average of how many people we know in our lives. They could change the lives of 1.5 million people to become more peaceful. Or if they remember hugging strangers, this is what these guys all do afterward. They feel more love for everyone they come in contact with. Or if their social network is 150 people, that's another estimate. They'll change the lives of 4.5 million. That's half the population of Israel.
Wow.
Or let's even say everyone knows 600 people. That's the most recent scientific estimate from Columbia University.
Okay.
The number of people that would be affected by that one intention experiment explodes to 18 million.
Wow.
And then if all 18 million are affected and each know 600 people, you know how many people we will have affected? Over 1 billion. Do that a few more times and you've affected every person on Earth.
On the planet. Yes.
So that gives you an idea of the power of these intention experiments, and also the power, the reflective power, the mirror effect of group intention. It not only heals the target, it heals the sender. And that's what we see over and over in our master class, in all of our Power of 8 groups. I see the senders heal every bit as much as the receivers. It almost doesn't matter whether you send or receive, because you always receive.
So true. Oh, thank you, Lynn, so much. I know that you're over in the UK and it's later there, and I don't want to keep you too late. And it was your birthday. Did you have a wonderful birthday yesterday?
I had a wonderful birthday yesterday. Yeah, I took a little time off, spent some time with my little granddaughter and one of my daughters, and also then had a wonderful meal with my husband last night. And we're celebrating with the whole family over the weekend. But my husband's birthday is also Monday, so we always and another daughter's is a week before that, and our son-in-law's the week right earlier in that week. So we have 6 birthdays actually in total in January. So we celebrate them all.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah, I was fortunate. My birthday fell on a Friday, and I got to celebrate with my 3 godchildren that are not children anymore. They're 21, 20, and 18. And actually, the 20-year-old, I turned 62 on the 12th of January, and on the 15th of January, she turned 20. So I celebrated with them and their significant others. We went out to dinner. I had the best time. I just
wonderful. So glad to hear it. So glad to hear it. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for being my guest again. Actually, I'm going to have a link to our first conversation. It was back in 2016. I'm going to have that link down in the description too. So thank you so much. You're
very welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been lovely being with you again.
Yes. And keep up the good work, which I don't have to tell you because I know that you're not going to stop with your wonderful work.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.